Hello and welcome to the Tonearm, where we connect you with the people and ideas moving culture forward. I'm your host, Lawrence Purrier. This week we're putting the Tonearm's needle on saxophonist and composer Alden Hellmuth. Alden grew up in Hartford studying in the Jackie McLean tradition and now works out of New York City. Her new album is called Tether, and it features a band and music built around two bass players, rounded out by drums, piano, and trumpet. Alden wrote music for the ensemble that keeps them all tied together, no matter how loud or free it gets. We talked about our shared background in Connecticut, what she took from studying with Herbie Hancock, and how she writes for the specific people in the room. Before we start, a reminder that we're only here because of you, as a listener, by sharing the show, and through the Support Us link at thetonearm.com. Thank you. And now, Alden Hellmuth. Tell me a little bit about the Hartford area. The gravitational pull for me as a kid especially was New Haven because I was much closer. I grew up as a teenager listening to, a lot of like mainstream music. I was a classic rock kid. I just started to get into jazz in high school. So we would go to the Civic Center to see shows and all that. I remember going to see some really interesting music at the Real Artways Festival over the years. I saw Sonny Chirac, Marc Ribot. I'm curious about the music that was in the air for you as a young person, either specifically to Hartford or just, what were you press and play on?
I grew up in Hartford/Rocky Hill, but I did all my schooling in Hartford, the Learning Corridor, that little across from Trinity.
Yep, gotcha.
It's funny because looking back, I feel like even Middletown, although I would go there all the time to get dinner with my family, like something about the music scenes never crossed over. And I think also just the teachers that I had in Hartford, it felt very insular. It was this little bubble of Jackie McLean students. There's a lot of students of Jackie McLean out in the world, but there are a significant number of them that ended up teaching at like Hart and the Greater Hartford Academy of the Arts and the Artist Collective, which is where I spent most of my time, It made sense to me as a young musician that I was listening to some later Jackie, early Jackie, everything Jackie McLean was connected to. But when I moved to New York especially, it felt like this door had just been ripped open. I was like, there's so much more.
Yeah.
It's interesting when you're in a community like that and it feels like there's one sort of vision of what the music is supposed to look like or what they believe it looks like, not what it's supposed to look like. It doesn't leave a lot of room for exploring outside of the tradition that they have there. And, Jackie is responsible for a massive community of musicians. And so it's really beautiful. But at the same time, I felt like I missed a lot of opportunities because there are these amazing scenes in Connecticut at Wesleyan, Anthony Braxton and Tyshawn. I think he was there at the time that I was in college. And so looking back, I wish I had branched out a bit more, but I think also the path that I've taken, I could only be where I'm at because of the experiences that I had. It's really interesting because Connecticut also is so small.
Yeah. Your comment about Middletown is interesting to me as well, because I remember learning about what was going on there and whether it was the incredible Indian classical music that was going on at Wesleyan or obviously the Braxton connection.
Right.
To have grown up not that far from it and to realize it was there. I mean, I feel lucky that I discovered it in my maybe early 20s, but I wish I had known about it even sooner. It was so incredible to be able to drive out there and see like an evening of Indian classical music in the middle of Connecticut. It was incredible. It was very impactful on a young me.
See, that's what I feel like I really missed was that opportunity to go see those things and to go see that kind of music. And I knew about Real Artways and I loved Real Artways for the cinema and the art. I did used to go to New Haven to see Joe Morris. And honestly, I really credit going down there to watch him play as was my dipping my toe into improvised music, because watching him play was one of those times where you see something and the wires all cross. And I thought, it's all there. This is something that really excites me.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And then I started to, find my own sort of way in 21st century and 20th century new music and it really wasn't until I moved to New York that I felt like that door fully opened and I went way back and discovered that I had totally missed the Anthony Braxton connection that was just down the street from me.
Yeah. When you talk about the Jackie McLean universe of people and the pedagogy and some of the attitudes, maybe, I hear all of the respect that you have there. I don't hear any of the light critique as a negative in any way, or you being, I don't hear anything overtly critical or negative there. But when you're in an environment like that, it provides an interesting role because it gives you an right? It gives you something to say, I can frame against, and that can be very positive when you're developing any kind of outlook, if artistic and otherwise. Did that give you something to define against or to push back against, or can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. I think when I did move to New York and that door opened, I found something I really loved and I ran towards it, and I thought, I'm never looking back. I want to run forward in this direction. And especially when I went to Europe and started working with an even wider range of contemporary artists and artists from a completely different lineage than what I had known for my entire life up until then, I thought, I'm never looking back. And it was this very anti sort of feeling that I had. But it's funny because very quickly I realized how it's connected in a circle.
That's right.
Everything is always connected, especially in jazz and in music in general. And it was a really beautiful, again, like wire crossing moment in my brain where I realized that my upbringing in the tradition, or this particular tradition, connected me to the music in a very particular way. Again, just completely full circle to even going back to Charlie Parker and realizing that Charlie Parker is one of the freest, greatest improvisers of all time. Being able to connect those dots and those wires and cross those wires in my brain was just really fulfilling and made me feel less anti about my upbringing in that community. I mean, some of the later Jackie McLean albums are pretty out there.
I love the spirit of integration or reconciliation, or just that realization of the cycle of the lineage and the deep connection between it all. Because especially when you talk to more artists, you start to see that, like in what people listen to, what they came up through. I mean, I would almost think your experience is a bit unique or not typical in terms of coming up through such a distinct silo, such an artist-rooted version of that. It's interesting.
Oh, absolutely. Totally resonate with that.
The word tether is fascinating to me because it implies this, this rootedness and this connectedness, but it also limits, right? Like if you're tethered, there's an outer limit of how far you can go. I'm curious about the dichotomy there. Like, is tether holding things together for you, or is tether holding things in place? Will you play etymologist with me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Semanticist.
So I actually think about it more as the band members are tethered to each other and they can move as a unit and move within, they're like a little galaxy. And within the galaxy, the planets shift and move. And then within the greater thing that is whatever we want to call space, the galaxy moves and shifts. And it's really this idea that even when you're in this sort of outer realm of improvised music where there maybe isn't something to ground you, like a harmony or a melody, like even in completely free improvised music, there's always a tether that runs between the instrumentalists or the band, whether it's through having played together for a long time, coming up in the same way, or studying the same kind of music, a language, a shared understanding. And I just love that idea, especially in jazz, because that's something we talk about in jazz so often, is that it is this shared language that transcends cultures and languages, and it's just music. And so it really pulls people together in a way where you can just say, do you want to play this song? And then everybody can improvise and play over it. And I think that's such a beautiful thing.
It's really interesting. Your articulation there lands for me and sort of colors a little bit about some of the next questions I was intending to ask you, or it makes me see them a little bit differently because I wanted to talk about a couple of the pieces. Again, this is a little bit reductive, but I was hearing some of the music in sort of a couple of different buckets, if you will, groupings, sort of. The first was around composition, and some of the compositions are more defined, if you will. There's like more structure, more notation, and then like, and now here's the part where it's free. And then there's other pieces where it seems like it's more improvisation, you know, more of the other kind of composition, however we want to call it. Maybe you have better words than I do. I'm really curious about that experience for you as the composer and as the sort of leader. Again, words are not great here. The rigidity of the first type of composition or the specificity of the first type of composition and the direction that gives the players versus the handing over of a lot of the decisions. As a composer, like, how do you think about that? How do you experience that? How do you trust that?
Yeah, that's exactly it. The trust is so important. I write for whoever I'm playing with, and I think that defines how my compositional process entirely is that I fully trust the people that I'm making music with. For me, my favorite type of music is the type of music where you have to listen and go, is this written or is this just being improvised? What's happening here? How did they move from this section to the next and come together and then sort of come apart? And this sort of, I said this the other day and I realized it's a kind of a beautiful analogy, is that you're taking all these threads from all these musicians, like different colors. You kind of set the pattern and you weave them together, right, in the composition. And then what I love is to pull all the threads apart. You don't know whose thread is whose anymore. But then to be able to take that mess of threads and pull it back together and then pull this completely new sort of woven structure out of this process is like so magical to me. And that comes from being in a band for a long time. Like you can do that completely improvisationally. Like the second quintet obviously is a great example of this. Peter Evans' band is one of my favorite examples of this too, where suddenly they're playing unison and you're like, whoa, how did we even get here? It's this really like magical thing. And I think I'm going for that. And I'm constantly trying to figure out how much information to give the musicians to achieve that. Because you don't want to overwrite and you don't want to underwrite. You want to create a space where people feel like they can be themselves and know that you as the composer trust them to be themselves. That's really important to me. And so a lot of my compositional process, it revolves around that.
Yeah.
And I think also for this record, I was going at all directions compositionally because I had just finished the program here in LA, the Herbie Hancock Institute. During that 2 years, we studied composition from Billy Childs and Ambrose and just a wide range of Herbie himself, you know. It was an incredible experience to hear all these voices and these processes. So I had all of these ideas, you know, and I was like, let's just try them all.
Could you tell me a little bit about some of those experiences at the Institute? Like what were or not even necessarily experiences, but maybe some insights and takeaways and aha moments? Like, was it revelatory or was it just building on what you already knew? Like, how would you define that 2-year experience?
It's hard to define. And I think some of the greatest takeaways from that experience were just being in the same room with people that I truly love and admire. Especially Ambrose is such an incredible mentor, and our conversations meant so much to me and still mean so much to me, and endless things that I learned from just talking with him. And so I'm eternally grateful for his mentorship. But then also just being in the room with Herbie Hancock is a very special thing. And he's 85 now, or I think he just had his birthday, so maybe he's 86 in May.
Yeah.
Just understanding that there is no ego in music for him and how that is the ultimate goal. He's more concerned with being a human. Music is just this channel of expression. And the simplification of that is it takes this sort of like weight off your shoulders, because being a musician can be so challenging. Actually, a friend said this morning, that you're screaming for love through your instrument. People get to point and say things about you and what you did when you're just like, this is what I love. This is what I'm doing. Please love me, or something. It's a really vulnerable thing, and we can be burdened by that a lot of the time. And then there's like the industry on top of that, and it can just feel really heavy. And then to meet someone like Herbie and play with someone like Herbie, where there's just this inherent lightness to existence and being and music itself and music creation, and it's beautiful. And understanding that there's a ton of work and discipline that it requires to be there and to be your best, but to not feel so burdened by it, to not feel such a heavy weight, to understand that you're doing everything is working towards this purpose of just this wonderful thing that words literally cannot express, because that's the magic of music,
Yeah.
you know?
It's really interesting that at his age and his life stage, he's choosing to spend time on pedagogy and on mentoring, and just spending time sharing back with people earlier in their journey. I wouldn't take that as a given.
Yeah, I feel so lucky. We had just had our first meeting with him, and we played, I think, Dolphin Dance or something, and I was grilling him about my favorite records, like Speak Like a Child, and I was like, how did you? And it's funny because anyone that's been around him kind of knows that when you ask him a question, he'll be like, I don't know, it was great, you know? Like, that's his response for like, how was it recording with these incredible people? And he's just so light, and he wants to talk about technology and all these things. Anyway, so we had just met him. He was playing some like LA jazz festival, I think, big concert in this giant theater. And I had gotten in and was sitting at one of the front rows because I had asked Lionel to put me on the list. And then all of a sudden I'm in VIP up towards the front. But Herbie gets up on the mic and he starts like talking to the audience a little bit. And then he looks down at me and he goes, oh, on the mic in front of like thousands of people. And he goes, hey. And I was like, me? He goes, oh, sorry. This is just my student, Alden. It was just one of those moments where I was like, Herbie Hancock knows who I am. Like, that's insane. I was just like, I sunk in my chair. I was just like, this is so unbelievably surreal to me. And then he came back and we did a bunch of tours together, and I got to know him more personally. And he's just such a special, special, special person. It's still just so surreal that he even knows who I am and took the time to like share his wisdom and his joy of music with us.
Yeah. It's funny because a lot of that comes, I've not spoken with him, and a lot of it comes across, coming out of COVID, the first two concerts I took my son to, we saw the Rolling Stones and we saw Herbie Hancock. At both shows, he was just like, these guys are in their 80s? This makes no sense whatsoever. And I was like, no, the only sense it makes is they are doing what they are supposed to be doing, and that's why they're doing it. It's a bit mystical, but it's not that complicated.
Right. No, it's not that complicated.
No. He kept turning to me about Herbie. He was like, he's 80. I was like, yeah, I know. I'm in my 50s and I can't do that.
My favorite is every concert, he loves to shock people by taking his guitar and doing a little jump, or like when he goes off stage, he'll like do a little jump and everyone always cheers. And I think that's so funny because he's really in such great health, you know? I feel like he plays into that. Like, you guys are going to love this.
When it comes to the presenting your bandmates with the overwritten and the underwritten pieces, is the band like pre-screened in terms of like, these are people that can handle either way? Or does it still, like, are there people that are more comfortable in one context or the other? Or is it like you need people who can do both? Or
yeah, ideally, yes, you need people that can do both. it's kind of a problem in modern jazz music in particular, is that at this point, the music has been so influenced by so many genres and it comes from so many directions. You kind of have to play a lot of different styles in a lot of different bands. And because, you have to understand the language, and it's really interesting to me how that has kind of evolved, where it really requires a lot now. My band in New York with Yvonne and Tim and Kanoa, they're excellent examples of they can nail a part, but then they can lose it and improvise but still be locked into like the heart of the song. They're just amazing musicians. Like that's just what it is. And when I moved to LA, I very quickly, Logan is one of like the most working bass players in Los Angeles and can play everything on bass. And then Miller is an amazing improviser, like creates the coolest sounds, has some really incredible compositional ideas, comes from a completely different direction than Logan. But again, to talk about that circle that sort of exists in this music, it's all connected in a way. I think that's kind of like the beautiful thing. And I admired both of the bass players on this record very much, and as friends and as musicians. And the whole project just came from a build that Miller had asked me to be a part of, with that Logan was also on. And I thought how funny it would be if I had both of them. And we did like a double bass quartet, because also knowing that they occupied two very different spaces sonically, it was just one of those moments where I was like, that actually makes a lot of sense. Let's do it. Not even just the way that they play, it's also the timbre of their instruments. They're so different. And I think that's like so special. I cannot imagine doing this project with any other bass players. I recently did a show in New York where I had two different bass players on it, and it was amazing and so fun to play with different people. But I think for what I envisioned for this project, I really cannot imagine making this record without Logan and Miller. Like, it's just so about who they are.
It's sort of like the obvious thing that has to be asked about this record is the two bass players. I wanted to ask a question around like how they don't become too much. crowding each other or crowding the music. A lot of times when I first have to prepare for a discussion with an artist, I try to listen to, especially if it's an artist whose work I'm not deeply familiar with already, I try to listen to the latest record without any context yet. Like, don't read the press release. I don't want to know much going in. I wasn't aware of the two bass players. I didn't really pick up on it. And then when I read that, I was like, wow, that's crazy. And I went back and listened to it and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes more sense now. They very specifically weren't stepping all over each other and crowding the music. And you knew that going in.
Yeah. Honestly, this project was my outlet. It's funny because I felt like I was writing more seriously for other projects while I was in the program. And this was my kind of like a fun opportunity to explore. And I just realized that this is something bigger. They really helped shape an idea into something that was much, much bigger. I feel very grateful that they both came into my life and really inspired this whole record.
The other thing about this record is it doesn't feel like in any way it's just a blowing session for the sax player. Everybody's got a lot of space. And I'm very taken with the engineering of the record, and you can hear the breath and the keys. And I really kind of love that in a record. And so, philosophically or even temperamentally, what does that say about you? What are you looking for then? Because you aren't just looking for a platform to play over.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Music is about the ensemble and so much about the people that I'm playing with. I want their voices to shine. That's why I'm making music with them, is because I love their voices. It's not all about me as the leader. It's about the collective sort of thing that we come up with. I think that's really important. And I also just want to shout out Lauda, the engineer who did this project. She worked her magic, that's for sure, because this is no easy feat, two bassists. She really saw the vision, she understood it, and she nailed it. We were in UCLA's very pristine, very beautiful, gorgeous state-of-the-art studio, and everyone was isolated. I had the big room, which was really fun because all of the reverb that you hear is pretty much natural. But then she also captured all the breath and all the keys and everything. And yeah, Lauda just did an amazing job with the record. And this project is something we've been doing at DIY shows and in random basement-y, punkish vibe.
Yeah.
And she even understood that. And I think she captured that sort of sound perfectly as well. It does sound it just sounds imperfect in a lot of ways, but it's also done perfectly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's not sterile.
Yeah.
It's not sterile.
Exactly. And I think that's the magic of jazz. And I think with modern recording techniques, we kind of lost sight of that a little bit. In those older jazz records, there's squeaks and squawks and clanks and all sorts of things that make it sort of beautiful and magical. And it's not the perfect mix, but it works. And you can hear people talking or laughing in the background. And I think that the joy of music is something that's so... You got to let people in on that. And I think that's one way to do it, absolutely, is to give them access to all of the sounds, the count-offs, the laughing, the yelling, the wooing,
Yeah, because the music can be so intellectual, or at least when it's technically proficient, there can be an inaccessibility to a listener that I don't think this record's guilty of it, but there's some music that's dense and it's what's my entry point? And sometimes the entry point is the count off. You're oh, okay, I hear where the groove is, or you hear that laugh after somebody takes a solo, whatever. Those little moments, they provide entry points, I think, for people of varying sort of ear development levels.
Oh, absolutely. Again, it takes that weight off of the series, especially in dense music, it takes that weight off of it, I love, there's this track by another mentor of mine, Steve Lehman, who I love. At the end of the track, I think Craig Taborn hits a major chord or something in a almost sort of comical ending, and then you just hear them burst out laughing. It invites you in on the joke, the listeners in on it. And I think that's really important. And you get that with live experiences a lot, but recorded music less so.
A lot of our conversation, and even just a lot of, I know our listeners won't be able to tell, but a lot of your body language is very you smile a lot, your tone is very upbeat. And I'm curious about the role of conflict in a musical environment. How do you navigate it? Are you seeking to minimize conflict, or do you harness it for creativity? I can't imagine it's always easy.
No, of course not. It's rarely easy. There's a lot of work and a lot of turmoil. It also says something about where I'm at, just in general. I think my first record, I did explore a lot of that sort of idea of conflict and tension. That was like the whole point of that record was I had a lot of feelings and a lot of tension happening in my life. And I translated that into exploring dissonance and opening a door in a certain direction. And then I think once I sort of started stepping through that door and just kept going down the path becomes clear as you walk down it, of course, which with some perspective now, I can look back and be grateful for everything. That sort of gratitude is really important and totally uplifts your whole being. And ultimately, I'm just really grateful for being able to make music and share these experiences and have the experience that I've had. And yeah, that sort of gratitude, it's perspective and gratitude that really just brings everything together.
Mm.
That's not to say there isn't conflict and there isn't tension, but I think it's just where I'm at in my life currently is just this like endless gratitude and perspective.
You alluded to the different types of rooms and how some of this music was played in sort of the DIY or punk adjacent type places. I love to talk with artists about the role of place in their music. And that could be as broad as like the city or, the macro environment that an artist is in, but also specific recording studios or performance spaces. It's always fun to talk to people who record at Village Vanguard because they've all got great stories and they all have different perspectives. What is the role of place for you, and how do you think the music comes out differently?
Oh, absolutely. I really think that our very first gig, that bill that Miller asked me to be a part of that inspired this sort of whole project, really defined sort of what I envisioned for this project. And I also think the city of LA, it really defined the direction because our first gig was at this very DIY space called Non Plus Ultra. It's a funky, fun, amazing place to play in downtown LA. As soon as I saw the space, I was like, this project needs to go in this direction, or I need to write for this space, which is kind of backwards. But again, this was like my sort of like outlet at the time when I was in grad school. So I was really having a lot of fun with it. At the very same time, I think it's all just like alignment and everything just coming together. My walk from the music school to my grad housing was about 30 minutes, and I would just spend that 30 minutes listening to whatever. if I wanted to check out a new record. And also driving in LA is horrendous and will take a very long time. So there was a lot of time that I spent alone, just thinking and listening and learning and developing ideas and questioning things. And at that particular moment in my life, I was revisiting this album by Deerhoof, Breakup Song, which I remember hearing in high school, and just my mind was blown, because the reason why I love music is when albums are totally unexpected and surprise you. And that album just hit all the marks. Production, songwriting, everything was unexpected. And I just fell in love with it. So I was revisiting that record at the time. And then I was also listening to a lot of like Japanese punk. I like recently discovered this band, Otoboke Beaver. So I credit a lot of the sound to that sort of era of my life. And then also just playing a gig at Non Plus Ultra, having that be our first sort of gig, was really defining in the sound. And it really was like, I was just having fun. I was really just having fun writing these songs that at the time felt totally left of what I was doing and working on. But it's funny because, again, it's just full circle, and it's exactly.
Yeah, it makes its way in. Yeah. I don't like to make too much of binaries, but I hear a lot of like polarity in some of the things we're talking about. And one of the things that strikes me is some of these spaces and some of these types of music are not as concerned with, or they're even like suspicious of like polish and tidiness and order in a way that I think is different than maybe conservatory training, which might be looking for a certain type of precision or at least proficiency. It's different values and different like aspirations in the music. How does that framework fit into all of this? Because it feels like it's in the air in what we're talking about.
Yeah, I feel very grateful that despite having gone to the Heart, and that's like that whole conversation we had before about the sort of community that existed in the tradition that I was brought up with, that tradition, and especially the later sort of Jackie McLean mentality, did not hold value in perfectionism. So I never really had that teacher that was like, you have to take the perfect solo.
That's great.
I was surrounded by people, Abraham Burton and Renee McLean, and then later Ambrose and Walter Smith, all these people that were pushing me to search. And then I, on my own, as a perfectionist, found a way to, like when I came to UCLA, started studying with a classical saxophonist to really get my stuff together on saxophone. And it's like this self-discipline, right, that is met with this search. People kind of reward the search. And I think I feel very lucky that I grew up and studied in places where the search was always the goal, that greater thing, that like the Sonny Rollins on the Bridge type.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. You couldn't have made that up. You know what I mean? Like, that's such a cool part of his story.
Yeah.
Not even like lore or legend. Like, it's real. It's part of his, like, he did that. It's so crazy.
No. Yeah.
I love it in every way.
The search is what drives music, you know? That's the magic of it.
Could you tell me the significance, if any, to the label that the record's on? The fit there? And
I feel very, very lucky that this label has taken this project on and supported this project. For a while, I was pitching to different labels, and I kind of knew that this wasn't as straightforward of a jazz record as some of my previous stuff, or, you know, just the band itself. When somebody hears it's two basses, it's non-traditional. So I feel very lucky that LEITER took this project on, because they promote a lot of non-traditional music or non-traditional jazz, or people who are reaching into other genres and crossing all of these. There's no boxes, you know. I feel like it really has found a home there, which is really, really special. And I just feel super grateful that they really love the record. And I mean, that's all that you really want from the label at the end of the day, is for them to really like the record. And I think they really do. And that means more than anything, you know, and it's just having a team that really believes in you.
yeah, without that enthusiasm, the project,
Yeah.
it's not good.
Yeah.
No bueno. Before I let you go, tell me a little bit about, you said you compose for the players. I don't want to hold you to that too rigidly, but I'm curious, as you start to think about, like, how long do you live with this project? When does it start to turn into the next project? Given that you do compose for the people you're hoping to perform and record the work with, what do you take from this that you can bring to that? How do you build upon the body of work or the learning from the experience when you are thinking about different people?
Yeah, it's interesting because already I've started to play this music in a completely different context, which has been a lot of fun. Bringing this music to my band in New York, it's different. It's completely different. But I also think it's really special because the energy of the project is understood because I've played with those people previously. And so they still understand where I'm coming from. And it sounds completely different, but it still captures the spirit of the record. Even just playing this music in that context has already inspired me to start writing for this band that is in New York, because now I'm based in New York. And unfortunately, I just can't fly two bassists out everywhere I go, even though I'd love to. And Justin Brown is just impossibly busy. It's already taking shape in this sort of new live experience. And I think that's inspiring me to write in a new direction and take this and shift it for that sort of context. And yeah, I guess it's just like it's an evolution of an evolution.
Yeah. When compositions can be performed in a variety of different contexts or even instrumentations, that speaks to the sturdiness of the composition. I feel like there's something like validating in that. I wonder, have you encountered works of your own that you cannot transpose to other environments?
Yeah, actually, there's one song from this record that I haven't really played since we tried it once, and even still, it just didn't hit quite the same. And I think that's Face the Wall, which is the one that was like the first song I wrote for this project. And I think it's going to stay there. It's going to stay in this state of, this was a time in my life and I recorded it, I captured it, and it will never be recreated. I think that that's kind of special and beautiful. And I don't know. And then all of the other songs translate really well into a different context and kind of open up in a different way. But that song in particular, just like, I have not been able to recreate it, even recreate it from when we first played it. I feel like the first time we played it, that first show, there was something, I wish I had a recording of it, but I don't. Yeah, I don't know. That's one of those songs that I don't think I'll ever play unless it's with that band live, which I still do tour with them when I come to the West Coast, and it's more feasible. And it's also, I think it very much has to do with the bass players too. Like, they get it. They understand that song because I guess it's really written for them at the end of the day. Like, it's like truly only them.
That's amazing. I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for your positivity. Thank you for your flexibility and the rescheduling.
Yeah.
Yeah, but thank you overall.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for listening to the record.
Thank you so much, Alden Hellmuth, and thank you for tuning into the Tonearm. If you enjoyed this conversation, check out the more than 300 episodes available in our free archive at thetonearm.com. While you're there, sign up for Talk of the Tonearm, our weekly newsletter. You can also become a paid supporter at the Support Us link. The Tonearm is executive produced and hosted by me, Lawrence Purrier. We're produced and marketed by Michael Donaldson. Editing and sound design is by Terry Grant. Our theme music is by Birdie, spelled B-U-R-D-Y. Thank you for listening, be safe, and stay in touch.
After listening to this episode, head to thetonearm.com, our online journal covering unexpected music and culture. Right now on the Tonearm, you'll find features on conductor and Wild Up founder Christopher Roundtree, Sacred Harp documentary filmmaker Matt Hinton, Mexican post-punk band Diles que no me matan, Winnipeg indie duo Sunday Club, and so much more. And while you're there, be sure to subscribe to our email newsletter, Talk of the Tonearm. That's thetonearm.com. The Tonearm, putting a needle on the cultural wax.